He's too tall for me to stand by.
Right. How long was he here? Like 20 minutes?
Is there a plan going forward for Venezuela?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, well, first of all, I just want to say what we heard in there, at some point, a movie ought to be made about the heroics of our military. An operation like this could have never been pulled off in the history of the world by any military on the planet. Pretty exquisite joint force in the middle of the night, no warning. I think it sends a very powerful message to folks around the world, our adversaries around the world, the capabilities of the U.S. military in support of this law enforcement operation. So that's the first thing. I also think, too, having a illegitimate communist dictator who was poisoning our country with drugs, sending criminals to our country, and hosting a playground for our adversaries, especially China, was a very dangerous situation. That has now changed. So the plan moving forward is obviously the focus is on stability, which is why Rodriguez went from VP, was sworn in as the president. But the United States has tremendous leverage right now with the naval quarantine. I mean, they can't get their sanctioned oil out of there unless we let it out of there. And so that's the hope moving forward, that the stability can be brought about and maintained because of the leverage that the United States has right now. And I think that's the best way to describe the plan moving forward.
Some senators are saying that the US administration is winging it when it comes to a plan for Venezuela going forward. Did you get the sense?
I don't think that's fair at all. I actually heard, with Secretary Rubio and others that were in there, if anybody comes out of here saying that they didn't get a clear picture of what this looks like moving forward, they're not being truthful. This is I think the planning for this has been very deliberate. What this looks like. Look, there are always contingencies. There certainly are. But if you would have seen, this was not an effort to disrupt their economy or topple a whole regime or an effort to stay there forever. That's not what this is. This was a very specific action in our hemisphere to protect the American people from a dictator who allowed China, Russia, and Iran to have a base of operations not far from our homeland. And so there is a plan moving forward. It's based almost, I think most powerfully on the leverage that we have right now on the oil that is stacking up for them, that they need to get out. And we are the only country in the world that can let that get out.
Where's that oil going, sir? Is that oil going to the Venezuelan people, or is it going to the US?
Yeah, that's the hope. No, this is for the stability of the Venezuelan people. And they've been robbed of that, again, by a communist dictator for far too long. But as an American senator, the interests of the United States of America is my chief concern, and the interests of the United States of America have been furthered here in the Western Hemisphere, not in some far-off place. For 20 years, we're trying to build a Madisonian democracy in the sands of the Middle East or a tribal backwater in our own backyard. And by the way, a throwback to a doctrine that has served this country very well for 200 years, which is the Monroe Doctrine, which is this is our hemisphere. And the American people are safer when you don't have the kind of actors like Maduro.
Does that mean, was it your impression that the hemisphere means there could potentially be plans for the same type of thing in other countries beyond Venezuela? Was that discussed?
That wasn't discussed. I would also point out that Colombia is a very different situation than Venezuela, if that's what you're alluding to. But that really wasn't the purpose of this. This really was to go through the operational sophistication there that took place, which I'm obviously not going to share, but then also a broader rationale, which I think they answered all the questions that were asked. Now, Democrats, I'm sure, are going to come out here and say they have more questions than answers. That's just political posturing. What we heard in there was a very professional team that did something that, again, nobody in the history of the world could pull off, and we did that.
Did Greenland come up at all, sir? Did Greenland come up at all?
Not in.
Do you have a personal opinion on that? Are you concerned about military action in Greenland?
I personally think that we ought to be active in pursuing Greenland. Absolutely. I think if you acquiring Greenland is be my support. I would support that 100%. That's not what anybody's talking about. First of all, Denmark's claims are nebulous. People sort of skip over that page in history of their claims to Greenland. But I would fully be supportive of Greenland being a much more integral partner of the United States of America. If you look at a globe from on top, all of our defense of the Western Hemisphere, of the homeland, whether it's ballistic missile defense or in space, Greenland has an incredible strategic value and the critical minerals there. The other thing I would point out, China and Russia are operating off the coast of Greenland. Denmark is not capable of protecting Greenland. And so, in my view, we have a very keen interest in Greenland.
Denmark is willing to work with the U.S. Why does the U.S. have to own it? Denmark. Denmark is willing to work
Denmark's
with the US.
not capable of the protection that we need for our country. That's the problem. Well, my suggestion for Denmark would be to go to their European partners and actually have this much energy about the defense of their own continent. How about protecting your own continent instead of relying on the United States, which has happened, by the way, for decades now? Many of those countries are total freeloaders of American security. The president has made it very clear. We have expectations of what you're going to spend on your own national defense. What you're seeing is a very clear pivot from some of the concerns that have been around this town, permanent Washington, for a long time, this obsession with Europe. NATO has a very important role. They have to step up in a much more meaningful way for their own continent while we focus on the Western Hemisphere and the Indo-Pacific. If you read the national security document that just came out, that makes it very clear what the United States plans are. What's that?
Out of NATO.
Who?
Do you think America
That's
wants
not
out
what we're
of
talking about. We're talking about NATO countries no longer being freeloaders of American taxpayers.
The UK and NATO.
Are there any other?
So
Are there any other
UK
questions?
helps out with the
Discussion of what
operation.
this means for the stability of Cuba.
Well, I think Cuba certainly took notice of what happened, and if the American people didn't know then, they know now that the Cuban security forces were very much involved in what was going on in Venezuela. So, you know,
So
I'm
you're-
sure they're paying attention.
Did the
So you're
briefing
saying
discuss
that NATO
possible action in Cuba or
No.
Nicaragua?
So you're saying that NATO are freeloaders, but the UK, as I understand, helped out in a significant way with the seizing of this tanker, this Russian.
What I'm
tanker.
talking about is
What
their
do you-
percentage of their GDP spent, and I'm not, percentage of GDPs aren't munitions. Munitions win wars. So the deindustrialization, this is sort of a side issue, but the deindustrialization that's happened in Europe, and including in Germany, has really hurt Europe's ability to defend itself and produce things to defend itself. That has to change. You know, if Putin is actually Hitler, you would think there'd be a greater sense of urgency on the continent, and we haven't seen that. Now, I will say there's been positive move forward in this term with President Trump. They're committed to that, but it can't be for pensions. It can't be for pensions. It's got to be for munitions. And so that's the kind of partnership that the United States of America is looking for with our European allies. It's not adversarial. It's just say, hey, we have big concerns in the world that center on the homeland in the Western Hemisphere, as demonstrated in the past week, and also the rise of China. Those are their biggest strategic imperatives. And so, again, it just calls for Europe to step up in a more meaningful way than they have before. Thank you very much.
Senator.